In developing news, Donald Trump's tariff roller coaster continues this morning with hefty tariffs on dozens of nations put on pause for 90 days, and most countries, except China, now subject to a 10% fee. The US president is hiking tariffs on goods from China to 125% after Beijing hit back with its own 84% fee on US imports.
Now, the 90-day pause is likely to provide little relief for Australian exporters who were already subject to that 10% figure. But it is good news for Norfolk Island, which had inexplicably been slapped with a 29% tariff. US stocks have unsurprisingly leapt on the latest news after days of turmoil across global financial markets. Our North America correspondent Carrington Clarke is on Wall Street in New York for us this morning. Carrington, g'day. Things have moved very, very quickly this morning. Just take us through what has happened.
Yeah, it was another historic day here on the New York Stock Exchange, and it really is the words and actions of one man that is driving investor sentiment here. Donald Trump deciding, or at least announcing today, that he would be putting a pause on the specific country, what he calls reciprocal tariffs, that had only gone into effect today. Investors latched onto that news, which indicated that this global trade war that we're currently seeing, that perhaps wouldn't be as bad as feared. And then we saw stock prices rally. The Nasdaq, which is the tech-heavy indices, was up more than 12%. That's its best day since 2001. But even the S&P 500, which is a broader index, was up nearly 10%. That would be a good result in any single year, and we're seeing it in a single day move. Now, Donald Trump has acknowledged that the tariff plan was causing fear on markets. He said he was paying attention, that people were getting queasy, suggested that they had the yips, an expression he's borrowed from sporting lingo. But really, this is quite a back down from Donald Trump. The White House said on Monday that no such pause was on the cards, and yet here we see this plan being walked back. He says it allows for negotiations to take place with a multitude of countries who the White House says have called asking for these conversations to take place. But this is a major back down of policies from Donald Trump. This is just a pause, though, and we wait to see what actually happens at the end of the 90 days. And worth remembering, of course, that China is still facing this 125% tariff on its exports to the United States. So the world's two biggest economies still going for each other's jugulars.
Yeah, that's right. Carrington Clarke reporting there from Washington. And of course, China is our biggest trading partner, Bridget.
Let's bring in our American in Oz, Sara James, for more on this. Sara, what is the strategy here? Because so many Australians will be waking up going, hang on a minute, there's a backflip now.
Yes, there is a backflip, and I really was listening closely to what Carrington had to say and kind of following on from that. This was all playing out live as things were unfolding on the markets. And so we heard Karoline Leavitt, who is the press secretary for the president, interrupt the Treasury secretary who was talking to reporters. Let's have a listen to what she had to say.
And we are going to work on a solution with our trading partners.
And if I could just, excuse me, Raquel, if I could just add to what the secretary said. Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here. You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America, not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need this president in the Oval Office to talk to them.
So that is going to be the White House pitch about what has happened. But it's also really important to note that this happened as a huge sway of senior billionaires and financial figures spoke out against what the president was doing and these tariffs. I'll give you a couple of names. BlackRock, the head of BlackRock, Larry Fink, the head of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, and also Ken Langone, who is a mega donor to the GOP, to the Republicans, and who used a word that I'm not going to use on the ABC to describe the size of the tariffs that were being put on Vietnam. So we cannot, so suddenly it seemed like what was happening, the turmoil on the markets cut through, also what was happening with the bonds, because that was a big deal. And so we saw this cut through. One more example, though, finally, of the kind of how it was all playing out. The trade representative, Jamieson Greer, was actually testifying before Congress. And he was asked, did you know anything about this? Was there a conversation about this? And he was clearly blindsided by the question, at which point one of the Democrats in that meeting said, this is amateur hour.
Fascinating. Ted Cruz, I saw, also was speaking to the president saying, hey, not sure how long you should do this. Do we have any idea of what happens now? 90 days of negotiation? Presumably Donald Trump's going to be hoping that people come and say, oh, we'd love to get these dropped. We can do some sort of deal with you?
Yeah, I think you've nailed that. I think that's exactly what the president does want. He does like to make deals. That is his MO. You know, these things have impact, though. You know, there's not just one country in the world who can make deals. The United States can make deals. China can make deals. This can play out in a variety of ways. And what are those deals going to mean in the meantime? I'm holding my iPhone in my hand. What's going to happen to the price of an iPhone? We've seen the amounts of money by billionaire Elon Musk trend down in a huge way. I mean, he's still the richest man in the world.
But he got someone a moron the other day as well, right? Within the White House. So,
yes, so he's calling Peter Navarro, who's one of the architects of this policy. He was calling him dumber than a sack of bricks, and then apologized to the bricks. So when you see that level of infighting between members of the president's cabinet, it's clear that this is, at the top all coming from Donald Trump. What's going to happen? What I predict is going to happen is that there could be a shakeup on the inside. People are questioning the advisors. That's the way to get Donald Trump's attention. Don't criticize the president, criticize his advisors, those poor advisors who gave him bad advice. Meantime, he is going to position this as a great opportunity for him to make deals with individuals, and the markets are going to watch and wait. They had a great bump right now. They're going to watch and wait, and they're hoping that cooler heads will prevail and that this won't continue.
Just briefly, what does this mean for other deals? I'm not talking about economic deals, but defence deals around the world, promises on global affairs, on human rights, that sort of thing. I mean, does it mean now nations can no longer believe that deals that have been done previously are secure and stable?
Well, I would like to say I think that the United States has a huge track record of following up on alliances. That has been tested and questioned in recent days. But I think you heard the defense minister speak earlier about AUKUS carrying on. I think there's a lot of understanding and appreciation that strategic relationships with the United States, while they might have been buffeted a bit by what's going on, they exist in to a certain extent, a separate ecosystem from what's happening financially. This is a president who's always loved to work in that financial space. The strategic implications and the strategic partnerships, they do travel along a different track. And there's a lot of that's going on very well behind the scenes, and a lot of enduring partnerships and understanding, not just at the very top levels, but lower down, that can keep that going on track. As the president, and those who are talking to him determine, what really is the strategy here? What are you trying to achieve by these tariffs? And I think that this is the first time we've seen him blink, and that's important because it indicates there's room to negotiate, and with Trump, it's always about negotiation.
Some flexibility. Sarah James, thanks very much.
All right, pleasure.
That's great.
All right, let's get some more of today's news now with Emma.
Thank you. Chalmers and Angus Taylor have traded bars in the Treasurer's debate, with the coalition dismissing claims by Labor that they are copying Donald Trump and his Department of Government Efficiency. Both parties claimed they are best placed to deliver cost of living relief to Australian households, while also accusing each other of lying.
It is important to remind everyone that we expect the Australian economy to continue to grow, and Angus and Peter Dutton should stop lying about that. That's an important correction.
We've heard the first piece of nonsense from Jim tonight, which is that we're not prepared to take on an American administration. We did when we were last in government, and we will again.
Doctors are urging parents and carers to be alert amid a surge in measles cases across the country. There have already been 52 cases this year, which is near the total number of cases recorded for all of last year and double the number from the year before. The Royal Australian College of GPs says vaccination is the #1 defence. A number of flood warnings remain in place for remote communities in Queensland and South Australia. Flooding along Cooper Creek has now reached the Karoline waterhole, with levels exceeding record highs seen back in 1974. The water from Queensland has already cut off South Australia's northeast town of Inaminka, which could remain isolated for weeks. The death toll from a roof collapse at a nightclub in the Dominican Republic has risen to 124 as rescuers continue to work through the rubble. It's not clear how many people were inside the venue at the time, but there are estimates which range from between 500 and 1,000. Officials say it's too early to determine why the roof fell. King Charles and Queen Camilla have paid a surprise visit to the Pope during their trip to Italy. The original meeting between the heads of the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church had been cancelled as the Pope recovered from his recent hospitalisation. The Vatican says the Pope expressed good wishes to their Majesties, who are celebrating their wedding anniversary. The royals also took a moment to enjoy some gelato as they greeted crowds in Rome.